Hey, this is an intro to Lab 7. I apologize if, based on my screen grabs and everything, this isn't going to exactly be Hollywood production quality right now. But let's just kind of, well, I guess I'll just start from where I'm at. Um, Today we talked about in class how a domain name is resolved in that it recursively or iteratively goes through a bunch of different databases called name servers that have addresses in them. And these are the types of address records that are within them. And if you watched the other video, you would have seen that inside your DNS manager, you have a record of you have A records, which have IP addresses, and then domains or subdomains that are associated with those. So, as part of the lab that you're doing this week, what you're going to be doing is setting up your own name servers and adding in records within those name servers that point to IP addresses that you manage. Now, the process that you see right here is for byu.edu, but you can have subdomains like www or testing.www or thinking.testing.www. And what you can do for each of those subdomains is tell a particular name server that it should actually point to another name server for authoritative information about that. And in this case, we have a domain for our lab called ISIS Lab, and then we have a subdomain called 404 Lab DNS or something close to that. And then underneath that, you're going to be registering your own DNS servers that point to your boxes. Hopefully that doesn't sound too confusing. At a high level, just the fact that we can keep on nesting this process as low down as we want to go, and that you are going to have your two of your computers be domain name servers or databases for a particular domain. I brought up here just a depiction of what the lab is like. So in the if you're, let's just say for example, you're at station 31, and if you're at station 31, you have 172.18.31 as your network name, and attached to there you have 31.2 is your corporate server, and 31.3 is Win10A, and 33.4 is Win10B. And so you're on this network with these IP addresses, and your router sits on the boundary between two different networks. There's another network, which is the class network, which sits on 172.16.10, and everybody's router has an IP address in that network as well. So it's almost like there's little networks, little subnetworks attached to everybody's router in the lab. But in addition to our routers that are sitting on two different networks simultaneously, we also have other computers that are in the lab that are not routers. We have, for example, 404 Lab DNS, a computer that represents Active Directory, which we'll learn about in the future, and others. We also have a router within this network that is connected to the public internet. So its inside, its inside network is the 10 network, the 172.16 one. Its outside one is the public internet. Well, it's probably connected to a couple other networks before it gets to the public internet, but we'll just pretend this is close enough that it literally has an outside interface that's on the public internet, and that's how we're able to get from like Windows 10A to this to this network and then out to another network. So it has to keep on crossing default gateways at each router until it finally gets out. And as it relates to DNS, if you were to set up a computer within your little ring here that was a public web server, well, you'd need to have some IP addresses out here that were registered with a name server that that would allow you to see inside and point to the right IP address. Fundamentally, what we're doing as part of this lab is setting up your external server to be something that can respond to DNS queries for your little website that's going to be, I can't remember offhand if you're going to put your website either on this inside ring or this other inside ring. Anyway, we're going to put it somewhere and use our firewall to point where our website's going to eventually go. But for now, we're just setting up DNS servers or little databases such that if we enter in a particular domain name, human friendly readable name, it could either hit our external server or it can hit our corporate server, both of which are going to be running copies of DNS, are both going to have copies of the exact same database, and if they were to be queried, they would return the address of something that is your website's IP address. Well, that sounded like a long explanation. Let me just repeat that. You're going to be setting up two domain name servers, one inside this network and one on the outside of that network, representing two different computers you have. And both of them are going to be able to ultimately know the IP address of a website that you are going to be managing. Okay, as part of this process, one of the things, I've got a few windows open to demonstrate this kind of stuff. All right, it looks like I've lost my login here, so let me quickly log back in again. All right, I'm going to enter in my super secret password, password1. Oh man, now everybody knows it. Okay, when we're adding features to our Windows servers, which we'll do this week for DNS and in the future for other things, typically we open up Server Manager on any, whether it's 2008, 2016, 2012 in this case of some server, we open up something and it looks like this, the Server Manager, and we click on Add Roles and Features, and as we click on through, eventually it allows us to decide on what additional features we want for our network. And so we can click on things like DHCP server, DNS server, Active Directory, etc. I've already done DNS for mine, but in your case, I believe you will be installing that for your lab today so that your server, or potentially multiple servers that need this service, will have it enabled for you. Okay, so you'll do some settings in there that associate names with IP addresses. Another thing, though, that I need to show you, or actually do for you, because of a little error that we have going on in the lab. Let's see, I'm going to pull up a remote desktop. Okay, so in Lab 7, let's see, this is page 7. There's a little problem here. You're supposed to be able to open up the Server Manager and remotely control the DNS on a different computer. And that different computer that I'm talking about is this one right here, 404 Lab DNS. What you're supposed to do in this server is create what we call a delegation, where we're going to tell this database for 404 labs dot lab DNS or whatever dot isislab.com. We're going to tell it that for subdomains like you're going to create, like for station 1-13, 1-31, 4-30, etc., we're going to say that your computers are the authoritative name servers for that information, and so go there. So we're delegating responsibility, passing it on down the line to somebody else. So as part, on page 7, you're supposed to do that delegation process, but I'm going to demonstrate doing that for you because of some permissioning problems that we have. So for example, one of our TAs or our lab assistants, Ho Yang, is at he's in section 1, station 11. So what he is supposed to do as part of this step is so he's supposed to go to 404 Lab DNS in this DNS manager that's already been configured, open up forward lookup zones, and where we have 404 labs.isislab.com, we're going to right click on there and say anything going to there that's looking for a particular subdomain, we want to delegate it to some other name servers. So I click on New Delegation, and Ho Yang is at 1-11, so he's in section 1, station 11, and it creates this fully qualified domain name there. So it's a subdomain of the other one. And we're going to add some name servers that are going to handle any queries that are related to that domain. These name servers then are allowed to create, or given authority to create, subdomains for the 1-11.404labdns, etc. Okay, so one of the ones that you're supposed to make is according to the instructions, 1-11.404 .44 labs.isis syslab.com, and then come down and type in 172.16.10. And in this case 111, and we hit tab, and it's going to say validating, but it's going to fail because the firewall's not set up yet, but we're good to go. So this name server is going to be associated with this IP address, and so we're good to go. I'm going to click add one more time and create another name server. This one is going to be ext server 11 in his case .islab.local, and we click resolve, and this is a known name already, and so it actually pulled up this information for us so we don't have to type it in. So we're good to go here. It's going to fail on validation again possibly because of the firewall issues, but for this step this is all we needed. So we've got two name servers here and IP addresses that should look familiar to you. They're in the format of things that you've set on your router, so or in your firewall. So with that being said, you are now able to go into your actual name servers, and in one case you will be creating entries by hand in your name server for your address records, and in another case it's just going to get a copy of the information in the other one. So one is kind of authoritative, it's the primary source, and then the other name server is just going to get copies of the other one so that the administrator in the real world wouldn't have to be manually entering in all the entries. All right, and so with that, I've created this entry, and we'll need to do that for every person in the class.